Good afternoon, everyone. You found yourself at the Rotary Club of Des Moines today. I'm Matt Busick, current president. We're happy to have you here. First thing I need to do is introduce several guests. So if you could each please stand and give the crowd a wave as I say your name, I'd appreciate it. Chaz Allen is first up, Executive Director of the Iowa Utility Association. Here is a guest of Christina Smith. Did Chaz not make it? Oh, there you are, Chaz. God, you were quick. Up and down you go. All right. Next up is Abby Betker. That was right, wasn't it, Abby? You're duly impressed. Abby is here, Senior Captain Manager for Lockheed Martin, which apparently means she sells helicopters for Sikorsky. She's here as a guest of Ann McFarland, and actually is Ann's sister. So, good job recruiting for the Rotary Club of Des Moines. Hello, there we go. All right, next up is Bev Hutney. Bev, it is so nice to see you. Little does everybody know that Bev is part of my family. But she got here as a guest of Marnie Hockenberg. Bev is formerly CEO of Stelter Company. John Jackson, VP of Technology from the Baker Group, guest of Kevin Kassir. Welcome, John. And then Doyle Sanders here. Doyle's an attorney and a visiting Rotarian from Northwest Des Moines. Good to see you, Doyle. Welcome. Okay, Juan Garcia is not here today, but it is his birthday. So if you have a chance to see him or if you want to reach out, wishing him a happy birthday, that'd be great. It's tumbler time. Tumblers are on the table for those of us who are members of the Rotary Club of Des Moines and don't have a green dollar sign on badge. That's a suggested $3 donation to the Rotary Club of Des Moines Foundation, please. Now, I would like to take you across the planet with me. I went to a couple of cool places over the past week. I was with Becky Greenwald. We went to Little Rock, Arkansas, stopped by Central High School, where in 1957, the Little Rock Nine made civil rights history by integrating this school. Then I was off to Venice with Ashley. If you take a look at these pictures, well done you. Although you forgot to put sunglasses on me, so you see how I'm squinting. We went to San Clemente Place, an island resort that's one of only 3 churches in the world with another church inside it. So thank you for taking me on your trips, everyone. If you're planning an excursion or trip, please take me along. I love to travel. You can check out flat mats through Kitty, and if you lose them, you just have to pay a hefty fine to the foundation. Okay, I'd like to invite Ann McFarland to the podium to introduce one of our new members.
Hello, me again. I am back to introduce you to another new Rotary member, Mason Powers. Mason is a private client wealth advisor at Bankers Trust Company in Des Moines. He graduated from Gilbert High School, which is north of Ames. He enjoys hunting, reading, and anything outdoorsy. Mason attended Southern Arkansas University, where he received his BBA in Finance and Entrepreneurship. I wasn't familiar with Southern Arkansas University, and so you probably guessed by now, I looked it up. I discovered that they have a very unique mascot. They are the Mule Riders, which is an especially apt name because in 1912 there were only 4 cars in all of Columbia County, Arkansas. So their football team had to ride mules from Magnolia to McNeil, Arkansas, where they would then hop on the train to go to their away games. Another fun fact about mules, because can you have too many? George Washington was the first American mule breeder. So now to the real questions. We asked Mason our usual questions, and this is what he said. If Mason were stuck on a deserted island with only one book, it would be the Bible. So for anyone who's keeping score out there, I think that gives the Bible 2 votes and the lead. We also asked Mason what skill he possesses that might surprise and delight people. And he said that he was a college athlete. He ran both track and cross country in college. We asked Mason what we would find him doing on a free day. He said that he would be spending time with his wife Jess, his daughter Sutton, and the family's 2 dogs. And when I read that, I was struck by his daughter's name, Sutton, because first, it's a beautiful name. And second, because the only other Sutton that I've ever heard of was Sutton Foster. Sutton Foster, for those of you who don't know, is an amazing Broadway actress. She's a 2-time Tony Award winner who most recently starred in Iowa's Own The Music Man on Broadway. I'm also her publicist. And what I wondered was whether the popularity of the baby name Sutton was tied to Sutton Foster. And based on my very scientific internet research, I can tell you that the name Sutton increased sharply in popularity, starting at the very time that Sutton Foster won a Tony Award for her most famous Broadway role as Reno Sweeney in Anything Goes. So, did Sutton Foster influence Mason's baby name decision? You'll have to ask him. We asked Mason where he's traveled to that he can't wait to go back to, and he said Charleston, South Carolina. And not to beat a dead mule, but the name Sutton means Southern Homestead, so I'm kind of feeling a theme here. And finally, we asked Mason about the best advice he's ever been given, and he said that his father imparted some wisdom from Henry Ford, which was, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Now, Henry Ford received a doctorate from what we Buckeyes like to call that school up north, so I don't love that, but I think it's a great quote. Welcome, Mason.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ann McFarland. You do a fantastic job with that, and welcome, Mason. It's great to have you here. I'm back to the podium because I'm doing the moment of inspiration today. So what I thought we would do with the moment of inspiration is remind everyone what Rotary is all about by walking you through the Rotary mission statement. It really is inspiring to me. I hope it is to you as well. The object of Rotary is to encourage and foster the ideal of service as a basis of worthy enterprise, and in particular to encourage and foster first, the development of acquaintance as an opportunity for service. Second, high ethical standards in business and professions. The recognition of the worthiness of all useful occupations. And the dignifying of each Rotarian's occupation as an opportunity to serve society. Third, the application of the ideal of service in each Rotarian's personal business and community life. And finally, fourth, the advancement of international understanding, goodwill, and peace through a world of fellowship of business and professional persons united in the ideal of service. Sometimes we try too hard, I think, to come up with something different, but you're all a part of a fantastic worldwide organization that, if we take it upon ourselves, can be inspiring every day. So appreciate that. If you could stand with me, we will go through the Pledge of Allegiance and the four-way test. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The four-way test. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Now just take a few minutes to greet those around you.
Hello, Sam.
Good to see you today.
Pleasure, Sam. Jordan.
All right, Good afternoon. I'm Brian Lamb with the Whites Company, and I'm pleased to make today's introduction of Matt Unger. Matt has been CEO at DMARC for nearly 4 years, making over 10 years of experience in nonprofit hunger fighting organizations, including his prior 6+ years with the Food Bank of Iowa. Matt has helped to lead major changes in both organizations, including major building projects for each. Prior to joining the nonprofit sector, Matt spent 12 years in politics and government, including working on multiple presidential caucuses and gubernatorial campaigns. Over that span, he spent 4 years as Chief of Staff to Lieutenant Governor Patty Judge, where one key aspect of his work was in Homeland Security and emergency management, including the Governor's Office response to the historic flooding and tornado disasters in 2008, and establishment of the Rebuild Iowa office in its wake. He and Lieutenant Governor Judge also partnered in a consulting firm focused on strategic planning for campaigns and businesses for 2 years before he made his way into the nonprofit sector. In addition to being a member of our Rotary Club, Matt volunteers his time with Lead Des Moines, formerly the Greater Des Moines Leadership Institute, including 6 years on the board of directors and a term as board chair. He also is a founding board member of the recently launched Iowa Nonprofit Alliance and lends his voice to several Greater Des Moines advisory and working groups, including Adapt Des Moines, or Adapt DSN, United Way Opportunity, and Capital Crossroads. As a proud Rotarian since 2019, he promises us he will be getting back into the swing of regularly attending these meetings.
Sorry.
Me too. Originally from Wisconsin with a stint in Northern Illinois before coming here to attend Drake, Matt has called Des Moines his home for over 25 years. He lives in Beaverdale with his wife Anita and a precocious dog and cat who allow Matt and his wife to live there with them.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back in front of Rotarians again and back at my home Rotary. As mentioned, I've not been here for a while, and hopefully after the next 25 minutes, that'll make a little more sense to you. Wrong way.
There.
Technology, I'm pretty good with it. So, DMARC has been around in the community for over 70 years now, and has always worked together on a focus of meeting human needs across Greater Des Moines. There's a couple really big legacy pieces that have happened over those years, including DMARC being the driving force behind the creation of the Oak Ridge neighborhood, which has blossomed to be maybe our best sort of asset as it relates to affordable housing and wraparound services and the great things that Terry's doing there. DMARC was also the driving force, along with United Way of Central Iowa, behind Hospice of Central Iowa, which has been absorbed into every step. Again, another amazing organization doing cradle to grave work with a great leader there in Trey Wade also. But for the last almost 50 years now, the main focus of our human needs work has been around food insecurity, mostly because it's just not getting any better. So our footprint across the community, our food pantry is made up of 3 different sort of aspects. We have our permanently placed food pantry network. Those are made up by the blue dots you see on the screen. We have 15 of those across the community. We also have a mobile pantry program that visits anywhere from 15 to 30 different sites over the course of a month. We really try to meet people where they're at, find built-in audiences that maybe don't have a pantry nearby or don't have access to emergency foods with that program. And then since the pandemic, we've had a delivery program where we deliver food to the door, next day service across the Greater Des Moines community. This just shows the partners that make up our food pantry network, those 15 pantries. They are independent organizations, they pay their own staff, they have buildings. We just make sure that they have all the food that they need to do their food pantry work at their locations. So the way our network operates is really based on 3 pillars. Number 1 is providing a dignified experience as close to so-called regular grocery shopping as we can make it. We try to have really welcoming and inviting environments, really treat people with a lot of dignity and respect. And part of what we do to make sure that we're doing that is we try to maintain certain products across our pantries all the time. Because when we're shopping, save for the great toilet paper disparities of 2019 and 2020, you don't go into an aisle and the peanut butter, there's just no peanut butter, or there's just no pasta today. So we try to make sure that we have those staple items at all 15 pantries all the time, and we think that's part of creating a dignified experience. The second pillar is providing healthy foods. It's been almost 15 years now, but in 2009 we did a study with Iowa State that showed folks that were getting their food from food pantries had 3 times the instances of diabetes. And if you think about the way we were all brought up with food drives, everything non-perishable, which is high sodium, the fruits are usually canned in syrup, a lot of preservatives, it makes sense that those are the kinds of foods that folks were getting from pantries. And so at that time, DMARC changed its focus to make sure we're providing a lot of fresh produce, lean proteins, refrigeratable items. It's not your grandfather's food drives anymore. The third pillar of our network is a commitment to data. And so at each of those 15 pantries and at our mobile sites, the first time you come, you go through an intake process. We ask some questions that are related to just general contact information, but then we try to understand some of the circumstances that brought people to the pantry in the first place. Because ultimately, we're not going to solve food insecurity by giving people food. We're going to solve food insecurity by changing the reasons that drove them into it in the first place. And having this data about what is the circumstance that the person's facing that came to the food pantry really helps us to build those cases and help shape policy. So you can see some of the questions we ask. Anyone can refuse to answer the questions if they want to, but by and large, almost everybody wants to give us that information because they know what we can turn that into when we go and we talk to folks who are making the policies that really impact these folks' lives. So at our food pantry network, we have two ways things work. You can come once a month and get all those staple items, those things that we're buying, make sure we have one time a month for your family, depending on the size of your household. And the only reason we limit that is because we're buying a lot of those items. And so it's just a matter of we only have so much capacity. However, any items that we get for food drives or through food rescue, some of the things that maybe are really close dated or about to be out of date, which by the way, all those dates are nonsense, they don't mean anything. Trust me. Those you could come and get every day if you need them. We call it anytime food because we're really clever with naming things. So while you can only get the staples once a month, you can come and get the things you need maybe on a daily basis or every once in a while, anytime you want. And if you think about it, that kind of mirrors our shopping experiences in general. If your household's anything like mine, we make kind of one big trip and then we make kind of trips here and there to get the things that maybe we need to make a meal or maybe we ran out of one of the things. We're also really focused on commitment to equity. And so with that data, while we can also use it for policy making, it gives us a better sense of what the folks we're trying to assist are facing and share that information across Greater Des Moines. So when you kind of look at it, the first time we did it was in 2020. And we just focused on racial disparities. And we break it down city by city using the census data against the data that we've collected in the pantries. And there's a lot of disparities, and it disproportionately affects people of color. I'm sure none of us are surprised by that, but you would not believe how many times I talk to someone about what food insecurity looks like across our community, and folks are like, well, it's not in Clyde, it's not in Waukee, right? No, it's everywhere. I gave you a plotted out map here of where we're seeing folks. It would be in every community. It would not be smaller in one space than the other. Maybe some of the households are bigger in some of the other zip codes, but you're gonna see in a little bit kind of what that looks like. More recently, last fiscal year, we took that a little bit farther and tried to break down into a whole lot of different demographics. If you're really into data and kind of a nerd about those things like I am, I would urge you to go to our website and look up the portrait of a pantry visitor. There's 100 pages of charts, but you can kind of find your community, see what it looks like in Urbandale, see what it looks like in Clive, see what it looks like in Des Moines, and where some of those disparities are. So this just gives you a flavor of kind of what our last fiscal year looked like. Almost 44,000 unique individuals assisted, which was kind of a low number given recent history and where we will be at the end of this fiscal year, and I'll explain that in a little bit here. But a few things to point out here. A third of everyone that comes through a food pantry in our network is a child. 38% of working age adults are working. A lot of what I hear frequently is these people just need to get a job. Most of them, if they can work, they are working. A lot of them are on disability, some are seniors, and a third of them are children. The scary number on this left side chart is that 25% of the individuals that came last year was the first time they came to a pantry. They'd never been to one of our pantries before. And it was a third of households. Then you can kind of see some of the breakdown by race and ethnicity, age and gender. I won't belabor the points too much. Again, there are so many charts. We could spend days walking through this information. If you're into it like I am, you're gonna love it. A couple things to point out here. Prior to the pandemic, everyone that came through the network, roughly between 52 to 56% were also getting SNAP benefits. We've seen that number dropping and dropping and dropping, and I'll explain why that's important in a little while. 95% of those who came through our network were 200% of poverty or lower. And the average number of visits made were 4 per year. So maybe it was 4 months in a row, someone was going through a tough time, maybe they only need to come to the pantry once every other month, once every few months, but it's not sort of this consistent, people are coming every 12 months when you look at our universe of visitors to the pantry network. We can break down sources of income, we can do it by age. Just wanted to give you a sense of how we can look at this data and how many different facets we can interpret of what's going on with those folks who are in need. When we look specifically at Des Moines, you can kind of see about a little more than half of our visitors come from 6 zip codes, but it's everywhere. The lightest blue on that chart is somewhere between 500 and 1,000 individuals assisted, and the darkest blue is over 5,000, and those are unique totals. So there's 6 that really drive the 5,000 and up, and again, it's a lot larger households in some of those zip codes where it's 7, 8, 9 folks that are living in the same place. And maybe in the suburbs it's a little less. Our busiest zip code is 50314. I want to talk a little bit about pandemic supports and why we saw some dropping in numbers. So in the last few years, there's been more assistance available to folks in need than I've ever seen in the 10 years that I've worked on this. And it wasn't an overreach. We actually just had the assistance that was probably necessary on an everyday basis to help pull these folks out of poverty. So our numbers really went down. The single biggest piece that impacted that was SNAP. SNAP benefits were being offered to households at the max allotment, which is the low end is $23 a month. And so the max allotments were up to, roughly it was averaging about $250 per household that they were able to get a month. We also had the direct payments and the stimulus checks. The child tax credits were going out with a monthly $300 payment for families with kids. We had a lot of different pieces of assistance that were really helping take people out of poverty. Now, I mentioned that the SNAP benefits was the biggest piece that impacted us. Gradually over those 2 years, these things went away. You know, we had the stimulus checks early on, but then those didn't repeat. We weren't able to keep the child tax care credits going, but the SNAP allotments went until April 1st. So when you look at this chart, the orange line is pantry visitor volume across our network, and the blue line is the average SNAP benefits. So I'll let you guess where the pandemic is. It's the X. and how much of an impact that has on whether or not someone needed to come to a food pantry to get their food needs met. The other thing you can kind of notice, all the peaks here you see are November. Novembers are always the busiest months of the year in Pantry Network. If you think about it, there's just a lot more expenses that time of year. And then with the idea that we have with Thanksgiving of this big family meal, a lot of folks need some extra help to provide that. Remember this. So just this week, we celebrated 1 year in our new building. It could not have timed out more miraculously because we moved in the last week of March, and that change to SNAP benefits happened on April 1st. We knew that was coming. We were trying to prepare for it. Had we not gotten into the new building, we absolutely would not have been able to meet the need. So some of the things we were dealing with in our old situation, we had 2 buildings, they were 3 miles apart. When something ran out at our main building, we had to send a truck 3 miles away, pick it up, bring it back. We didn't have enough storage capacity to really maximize what we could buy. We didn't have enough cold storage capacity to take advantage of donations where we might have been able to get a truckload of produce, but because we had very small freezers and coolers, we could only take 3 pallets of it, and we still needed to get those products. And our mobile program was loaded and housed outdoors 365 days a year. So whether it was snowing, raining, whether it was 100 degrees, whether it was -10, those were outdoors. The team members that worked on them had to do that all outside. We had to heat them in the winter, cool them in the summer. It was absolutely inefficient. So you see these blue boxes over on the right. That's our original warehouse at our location that was on 36th Street. It was really not much more than a Morton building. We moved out of there in 2013 into the Mulberry facility, which is the 1435 blue facility there you see, laid into our current facility now. And Scott Avenue was the second warehouse that we had to work with the city to have to meet the longer term storage needs where we were shuttling things between it and Mulberry. But you can kind of see how much we've improved our footprint and really changed what's possible at our organization. So in our new building, we have 3 times the pallet capacity with dry goods. We have 10 times the cooler and freezer storage. We've been able to take 5 full truckload donations of fresh fruits and vegetables that we otherwise never would have been able to take. It makes a huge difference both to those folks coming to the pantries to be able to get those products, but in our ability and capacity to be able to provide them. If we don't have to buy a truckload of produce, depending on the item, that's anywhere from $50,000 to $80,000 worth of product. To get a donation like that is absolutely gigantic for us. Our mobiles now are able to load and park inside. You can kind of see in that top right picture, there's sort of a raceway with 2 doors that those come in. We have 3 of those units. It's a much better situation for those employees. It's a much better, efficient way to handle those vehicles. We don't have to heat and cool them anymore. We've doubled up our volunteer space. It's nice and well lit. And we have a food pantry on site in a neighborhood that needed additional pantry service. You can see that in the bottom left picture there. Really tried to make it look and feel like a convenience store. Again, kind of aiming at that providing a dignified experience. And as I noted, we moved in the last week of March 2022. Here's what happened starting April 1st. Now, if you're running a business, these numbers look awesome. If you're running a charitable food organization, these numbers should scare the hell out of you. April, we had a 42% increase over the April of the prior year. You can see by August that raised to 86%. The number of individuals that we were seeing each month, we were setting records. It was the busiest month ever. We had daily records that we continue to keep breaking for busiest day ever we've seen in our network. And the scarier number here, again, as I pointed out with some of that data earlier, are the first time visitors. You can see how that really ramped up, and to the point in August where we were almost at 2,000 folks when you're talking a 10% share of those who came to the network that month, which that number usually for us had been 4, 5, 6% new visitors. This is that snap chart when you take it a little bit further out. Now, you're all very smart people. I'm sure you can tell exactly where it was that those SNAP benefits changed, and you can see the impact it had on us. Well, usually there's sort of a bouncing ebb and flow to the course of the year. When that SNAP benefit changed, we just skyrocketed straight up. And it really has stayed level there ever since. Collaboration is a really big thing for us. To be able to do this work and find folks where they're at, you have to partner with a lot of organizations. Many hands make light work. So there's a list of some of the folks here. In fact, tonight at our new location, we're hosting a resource fair where we have over 50 different providers that are coming, either to help enroll people into programs, give them information about them, in what we call the care corridor. So right next to us at our location at 100 Army Post Road is an Iowa Works office. A block away there's a WIC clinic and a community action agency. DMAC is really close, there's a brand new VA clinic. So we're really trying to get this concept of how many can we make one stop for you instead of 10 stops to try and get the services that you need to help meet your family's needs. Because folks are putting together a patchwork quilt of assistance just to try to get by, and they might spend as much time moving around trying to get to the places that provide these as they can working. Now, I'm sure everybody's really excited to hear about. As with any relationship, sometimes you have disagreements, and we had a very public one recently with the food bank, who is a partner of ours and remains a partner of ours. Sort of the crux of it, the food bank, they saw the same thing we did. By September, you saw how the food insecurity was skyrocketing. They really wanted to make sure that equitable assistance was being provided across their network and made a new regulation that everyone had to provide at least a 3-day supply for everyone that visited their pantry in a month. Sounds easy enough. To me, at my first read, I thought, okay, yeah, great. Proud of you guys for doing that. But what was a nuance for us was that we had applied that to our network. So you could visit any pantry in the network once per month and get that, and then you'd be able to come and get the anytime items whenever at any of the pantries. But the prospect of potentially having to do that 15 times across our network, we didn't want to have the resources to do that. The other piece we were concerned about was the equity around someone being able to make their second or third visit to one of the pantries before someone else could make their first. And maybe some of the harder to get items had run out by then. So things like dairy, eggs, these are not easy for us to get and supply in pantries. And to have to be able to have someone get 3 or 4 of those before someone could get one was something we were concerned about. So we kind of reached this impasse. We put it to our network and told them this is a decision that each of you get to make. I don't dictate their partnership with the food bank. There were 4 of them that decided to go forward and try to meet the new standard, and then another 10 that decided they couldn't, didn't sign the addendum, and then those partnerships ended. So we couldn't find an alternate way forward. We kind of reached this impasse, and we were offered and accepted help to continue a dialogue and see if we could find another path forward. To their credit, the Community Foundation and United Way of Central Iowa funded Scott Racker and Jordan Bernoy to kind of help us facilitate that. I'm sure a lot of you know Scott, really good in this kind of scenario. Also, Jordan comes from a consulting company called See What I Mean, and he has experience both at the Feeding America level and with the Northeast Iowa Food Bank, so he knows and understands the space. And we had some really good conversations, and it led to some really good new partnerships, and I'm really proud to say that. First and foremost, you'll remember the anytime food, that's really driven by the items we're able to get from food rescue. And when we lost those food bank partnerships, we lost a ton of that food rescue. So one thing, to her credit, Michelle suggested was let's get DMARC back in the food rescue game, and you can provide that across your network whether they're partnered with the food bank or not. That was really huge because partnership like that has never existed before. They were also able to bring on our D-Market, which is our cute name for the pantry on site. I actually do think that's a cute name. It's much better than Anytime Food. And that was one of our team members came up with that. So because I'm a put your money where your mouth is kind of person, I didn't feel good about going to the network and asking them, please try to meet these standards if we weren't going to do it ourselves at our own pantry. So we made that partnership, and we have an agreement with the food bank that if this doesn't work, we will come together and try to figure out alternatives. No one wants to let anyone fail. So going forward, we're suggesting to our pantries, if you can, try to meet this new standard that the food bank is asking. In the case that for those who still haven't re-engaged their partnership with the food bank, you'll be set up to do so. And for those that were, they had to meet it anyway. So we're allowing for an opt-out if it's gonna create a hardship for them, but really in the spirit of partnership, trying to meet this need and meet the guidance that the food bank is trying to have, working together, making sure we're talking together. And a big piece coming out of this is that Scott and Jordan are continuing their work to do a broader study across the community of sort of the whole face of food insecurity, as far as who's doing something to impact it, what does it look like numbers wise as far as those folks that are facing it, and what kind of funding and commitments do we need from the community if we're gonna meet the needs of these folks? And then how do we work together to make sure that organizations like ours, the food bank, and dozens of others have those resources to do this critical work? So, things are getting better. Don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. Much, much worse than a partnership disagreement is the stuff that's happening right now at the Capitol. Our SNAP program is really under attack, and it doesn't make a lot of sense in the way that it's being kind of portrayed. And I'm gonna give an example. Whether or not you're for or against school savings accounts, because it's a new sort of thing that's out there and being offered to folks to get them something that they don't have access to, I'm gonna use that as a comparison point. So, the education savings accounts, you can be up to 300% of poverty, and you get a benefit per child that's just short of $8,000 per year. For SNAP, the ceiling is 160% of poverty, and if you're at that level, you get $23 a month. The education savings accounts are all state funds. SNAP is all federal funds. The savings accounts for education, there's no asset tests, no additional requirements. For SNAP, you have to give information about your bank accounts, you have to list all your cars. They're trying to put an asset test in to make sure that if you have any savings saved up that is more than $15,000, you are not eligible for the SNAP program. Now the problem with this is we're trying to lift people out of poverty, and now we're going to penalize them for saving up in the way that is going to help get them out of poverty. Again, it's an $8,000 benefit roughly, versus on the max end, $288 per individual benefit. And there are already public funds available for education. There's no other public funds that are available for food assistance. So the idea that we need to test these folks in this way, but we're just going to give private education to folks without these testing, I don't understand how we balance that and how that makes sense. As you saw in the data, people are already working who are coming to food pantries. A third of them are children. What this legislation is going to do is take food away from people. It is a 16-page application to enroll in the SNAP program. 16 pages of information you have to provide to get $23 a month. I don't think we need to make it harder to access that program. In fact, we need more people enrolled in the program. Iowa is at a 14-year low in enrollment in the SNAP program. And not having people in it doesn't save money. That money just goes to other states. This is federal money. that is allocated to us for these food needs. So we can fix our partnership problems. We can't fix all our policy problems. We're trying, but it's huge because then these folks come to us. And where we're buying food from is largely out of state because we don't have big food producers in our state. That's food that people eat. There's a lot of food that food eats. So how can you make an impact? Volunteer. The number one thing I always tell people, volunteer. Come volunteer for us, volunteer at one of the pantries. We have committee work, you can work in the pantry, there's a lot of different things you can do. Maybe you just like to put cans in boxes, you can do that too. You can hold an organized food drive. We can give you some guidance on what those items are that we always try to have in the pantries so that you're really making a big impact in that way. Financial contributions are of course amazing. And then either become or continue to advocate for these folks in need. And most of all, keep being you. There's a lot of really great leadership in this room. There's a lot of you who have done a lot to help DMARC specifically. Can't thank you enough for that. This club itself has done volunteer projects for us. Cannot thank you enough for that. We have to keep doing that work because this problem is just getting worse. So I need you to keep being you. And with that, I will take your very difficult questions.
I noticed that in your top 10 questions, one of them was, are you a veteran? How do you work that up? How is that important?
So there's specific funding available to fund food for veterans. So it's a number that we try to track. Roughly, I think 10% of those that are coming to food pantries are veterans. I think we all feel a responsibility to make sure that those who have served in that way have basic human needs met. It's the least we can do. So it's a focus point for us on making sure we're tracking, is that growing, is it shrinking? Are there other organizations we can work with to support those needs? To, again, make sure that a constituency group that we absolutely should be taking care of is taken care of. Don, you had a question?
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt, for the presentation. Great presentation. You probably communicate with other directors such as yourselves around the country, around the state. How does the Des Moines area compare with other regions in the country? Are we worse off? Are we losing ground faster than other areas?
Sure. So the question was kind of looking across the country, how does Des Moines compare with other areas? I would say we're on par, we're probably in the average. One thing that we dealt with here that others are just starting to deal with now was that SNAP change. So there were roughly 20 states across the country that ended that early. It ended nationally this April 1st, so in a couple days. So some of these states are gonna start seeing that skyrocket that we saw, and a lot of them have been reaching out to kind of learn from us and what was our experience and how quick did that grow, what can they expect. It's been really hard to kind of compare year to year, just everything in the pandemic the last few years with those extra additional supports, and then with what's been happening with inflation too, and then, you know, throw the bird flu in there too to make eggs a ridiculous amount of money to purchase. There's just all these kind of outlier impacts right now. It'll be really interesting to have this sort of full year data now where we're in this new or old level of SNAP assistance to be able to look at how that changed and compare that back to 2019, which was record-setting year for us. The thing we have to remember is we had a lot of problems that were driving people into food insecurity before the pandemic, and we did some temporary fixes, but we didn't do anything to impact any of the reasons that were driving them into that. So none of those issues have been solved, and there's a lot of them that need to be solved. Good question, Don. Jason?
First off, thanks for the presentation and everything you do. As I sit here in a skyscraper eating my gourmet food, looking out over a thriving city, I wonder, what is the pushback on $23 a month that's already federally allocated when we have $2 billion in surplus as a state? Like, we care so much about children that we have to legislate constantly about them. What's the answer when we say, hey, these people are working and can't eat? Like, what's
So the question is, what is the deal? Why are people pushing back on people enrolling in SNAP? Why don't they understand the things that we're telling them? I don't have a good answer to that question. I don't know. The sort of prevailing argument is that we have to prevent fraud. There's very little fraud in the SNAP program. That we have to make sure people are earning this. Again, you saw the workforce data. A third of the people on SNAP are also children. So we have to remember SNAP is not a workforce program. This is a food program to get people a basic human need. And the other argument we've heard is savings. We need to make sure that we're saving taxpayer dollars. But these are not state funds. We're not saving a single dime in state money. We're actually increasing costs because it's going to take 200 new full-time employees to implement the things that are being proposed right now. So we're actually growing government at a time when we're trying to shrink government. It's really been kind of banging our head on the wall, trying to figure out what's going on. Why is this happening? I don't have a good answer to your question. Facts aren't being, yeah. They don't believe our facts, I suppose. I'll take one more.
What's the multiple these days if someone contributes cash as opposed to buying an item and bringing it in?
Sure, so the question was, what's sort of the difference between donating an item versus donating cash as far as our buying power? We can usually stretch your dollar 4 times because we're buying at bulk and at wholesale cost. So where you go to the store and buy a can of tuna for $1.60, we can probably get it wholesale for 40 cents. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate your support.
Sean, did you see what he's using? Thank you, Matt. It's good to have you back. Ryan, good to have you back. There are a few of you. Lynette, good to have you back. Love having all of you back at Rotary. Thank you, Matt, for being a member of our club and for doing the fantastic work that you're doing in this community to make us proud and to create safety nets that are critically important. We appreciate you, and as a token of our appreciation, we're going to give a book in your honor to the Des Moines Public Library. Are you ready for this?
Yes.
It will join the Rotary Rosie Reader Band Collection. This is, of course, as you know, a traveling library that was made possible by this great club. This club's donation writes you to the Des Moines Public Library. So your book will be part of that collection. Upcoming meetings. As you consider the following upcoming meetings, please think about somebody who might find these wonderful programs that our program committee works so hard to put together interesting, especially if they might, in your humble opinion, be a great member of a prospective member of our club. Invite him or her. Make sure that you RSVP for both yourself and for guests by Wednesday at 9 a.m. Kitty likes to hear from you, and the Embassy Club needs to know how many of us will be here. So on April 6th, Dan Houston from Principal Financial Group will be here. On April 13th, Governor Kim Reynolds will be here. And on the 20th, one of our best programs of the year, our Teacher Educator Awards. That is it for today. Thank you for being here. Enjoy the rest of your week. We are adjourned.